When I say communication, we're really talking about communication in print, via email, via text, and by combinations of those things. So church office is really meant to be a one-stop shop. Some of you folks are using this solution already. A day in the life, really a life in the life of a parish. Ledger is the financial piece, which is your payables, your vendors, your expenses, your year-to-date, your budgetary type related data, and of course the ability to print checks and payroll and all that. So both of those are primary. There's actually a third module which some of our parishes are using, which is a larger facility scheduler. And that does, for a mid to large size parish, help us manage our facilities and rentals and who's using what room and what equipment do we need and packages for weddings and baptisms and the like. Here tonight, we're really wanting to focus on stewardship and giving. So I wanted to give you a very, very quick story. Came to me actually from an executive of PDS. PDS, the gentleman in question brought his then 20-year-old son to the bank to open an account. He wanted a checking account. So they sat at the bank. They were there for, quite a while, well over an hour and a half. They handed him a passbook. They talked to him about his checking account. They told him he would receive his plastic debit card and checks in the mail. And so the boy went. 4 years later, and we're not talking about ancient history here, 4 years later, son number 2 turns 20. They go to the same exact bank. The child is handed a debit card on the spot. There's no mention of passbooks, checks, checking accounts, checkbooks, or any of the like. So when we talk about, how do we work and how do we interact with our parishes and our parishioners, we really want to enable our parishioners to feel able to give in the freest and most flexible amounts of methods, right? So if we're taking son number 2, thank you, Stacey, when we're looking at son number 2, when we're looking at most millennials, in fact, when we're looking at most people, including myself, are we honestly expecting that 20-year-old to go to the bank, withdraw money on his way to church on Sunday, and then give it to us? So what Father Costa and Father Jim did, quite wisely, was to think about how do we build a better mousetrap, right? How do we make it easier for us to let our parishioners contribute? And so there's so many applications to that. Father might talk about a new initiative on a Sunday morning. Well, I don't have my checkbook. I can't offer it in the tray Philoptochos is holding. How do we enable this? So as we talk about moving forward, and I'm happy to entertain any questions whenever Stacey feels it's appropriate. Parish data really helps us run our parishes, and the fact that Banco is the integrated solution into the parishioner level record really enables not only ease of giving for the parishioner on the fly, but also eases the burden on the office because it's an integrated part of the solution. So as part of the GOA, as part of customers of Parish Data System, we are experiencing and enjoying discounted pricing. And we're going to hear a lot about Kiosk. Jim and Stacey did a great job in putting together that wonderful newsletter and that piece about, that interview about e-giving and the kiosk. We're going to hear a lot about the kiosk. Jim and Father Costa took it to another level. We started, as we should have, with the link on the website, and we're going to be talking about that. So the kiosk, the link on the website, there's many different variations. I'm sure we're going to be talking about that. And so I'm standing by here. I'm happy to answer any questions. One thing I do want to tell you is that now version 9, which is going to be released within, I expect, the next 3 or 4 weeks, will have an even higher level of integration. So thank you for the opportunity to start off this session tonight, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Jim.
Okay. Effie, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and mute your audio. Jim and Father Costa, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Just by way of background for everybody, in case you didn't read the case study, in about April of 2017, so about a year and a half ago, St. Catherine's Church in Falls Church, Virginia, began using this donation kiosk and can do a number of things with it. And I think they've got a good, like I said, year and a half worth of data to their use. So Father Costa and Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you both, and thank you.
Sure. Just as an introduction, first of all, welcome to everybody. I think it's a wonderful thing that, especially us older priests, and you look like Father Kouroulis, Chris Kouroulis. Do you know who he is from Chicago?
I do. I met him at Ionian Village years ago.
No, that's what he looked like 35 years ago. But, very handsome man, so it's okay. Anyways, what happened was just like we had to address the issue of what happens to our young adults, and basically even our young people that come to church who no longer really use cash any longer. And basically at a meeting, I said, Jim was president of parish council at that time. I said, can you investigate about doing something with a credit card, since we use it for festivals and other things? And that's how it started, because I don't want to go to the wrong story. It happened from an actual case. Somebody told me they couldn't come to church because they didn't have any money on them. And they weren't willing to go to the bank because the bank was in D.C. And from then on, it's history. So I'll let Jim give you all the details, because I have a hard time doing email. So you can't trust me to set up a kiosk for you. But we'll be here to answer questions afterwards. So Jim Stewart.
And I would be willing to bet, Father Costa, that most everybody on here whose parish has a festival is using credit cards for their festival, and like Columbus, seeing the increase. And we're up to almost 50% of all of the charges that are done at our festival are coming through credit card. So Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Well, it's a pleasure to speak to everybody tonight. As Father said, about 2 years ago, our community became intrigued with the idea of e-giving, electronic giving. And we found out fairly quickly there were a multitude of solutions. And it didn't take us long before we realized that, at least for us, was one that would interface with the existing PDS system that we had, that you just heard Effie speaking about. You might ask, why is that important? It's a very practical reason, and that is that when someone gives, if you don't have interface with the system that you're using to record that data, your poor bookkeeper on Monday morning is going to have to manually re-enter all those transactions. So there was great value for us to find one that immediately interfaced and recorded those transactions in real time as they were being made. And I don't have to tell you how much of a big deal that is. I'm sure you can all appreciate that. We did consider a number of systems before we settled on Banco. This isn't a commercial for Banco. It just happened that we had just recently made the transition to PDS. It made sense. And when we explored Banco, we found out they were entirely easy to work with. They had a number of features that appealed to us, not the least of which was that they helped with the design and the integration of the product. They also, as part of the service, provide a giving page for your church website. The giving page is a little bit more robust, as you might well imagine, than is the kiosk, if only because you can put more categories on it, more categories of giving. It's a little bit easier for some people to to give from the convenience of their home whenever it suits them. The other thing that's very powerful about the website giving page that they also provide is that it affords your stewards the opportunity to set up giving plans whereby they can designate a certain amount to come out of either their checking account or their to be debited against their credit account on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever they prefer. And we found that quite a number of people found that entirely attractive. Most people aren't exactly sure what to think of when we talk about a kiosk. They come in all sizes and shapes, but what you need to know for us, and one of the things that was a very compelling issue in favor of adopting this, is since we were going to introduce technology into the sanctuary, we wanted it to be as unobtrusive as possible. The good news is that the kiosk is small and inconspicuous. It's only about 15 inches high. It's about 13 inches wide and about 7 or 8 inches deep. It's also black. And Stacy, I wonder, can I ask you to put up some of those pictures that I sent you? Is that possible?
You can ask.
Okay, well, if I can't, that's okay.
Yeah, give me a moment and see if I can figure this out.
Okay.
What I may be able to do is send them to everybody in the chat function.
Okay. That's good. Just let me know when you do that so that I'll be able to speak to them.
Okay.
These pictures are pictures of the screens of the kiosk, and I just want to show you what the realm of the possible is. And I also want to tell you, when you see these screens, at least for us, and I suspect any vendor you choose, but since we're talking about Banco, I can tell you categorically that they're very easy to work with. They help you design the screens. They also give you a back office link that helps you revise them as necessary and when necessary. I told you that the size was important for us. The next thing I'll tell you is one of the things that we found out that was very important was, where do you place the kiosk? The first thing that came to our minds is, oh, of course you place it at the Pangati. At least for us, that was not a good option. And the reason it wasn't a good option is because there's too much going on at the Pangati. And we found out that not only did it afford the steward using the kiosk a greater element of privacy, but it also helped us avoid things like backups at the Pangati. So we located it adjacent to the Pangati just as you enter the church, and it's out of the way, but everybody knows where it is and they go to it immediately. The concept of operations for how you use this is pretty straightforward. A parishioner enters the church. They can either give traditionally by using currency at the Pangati, or they opt for giving e-giving at the kiosk. And the pictures that Stacy will be sending you, or is in the process of sending you, show, like I said, the screens where we located the Pangati relative to our kiosk. And I'll tell you right now, you won't be able to see it, but when you look at a picture of one of the entrances to our narthex, you'll see the kiosk in the right-hand side of the picture. It's not in the frame of the picture, but the Pangati is immediately to the left. So it's right there when they come in, and it's out of the way, and it gives people as much privacy as is necessary. Nevertheless, as you notice, the parishioners are greeted by a welcome screen. They hit the button to go to the next screen, and they pick what they want to. In this case, on a Sunday morning, more often than not, people will opt for the candles and trays option. They might even opt for stewardship. They can make multiple contributions at the same time. After they choose their categories, they enter their information, swipe their card, and they're given the option of receipts. Typically, they use the receipts for their own personal records, and they also have a receipt or receipts, depending on how many they choose for, that they can drop in the tray to indicate that they paid whatever they paid for candles, or they can keep another receipt to drop in the tray to indicate whatever they've designated for trays, so that they've got something to put in the tray. Not all opt for that, but it's available.
Jim, just to give you a moment, I did send those first two pictures, and then I've just sent a third one that's the close-up view of the screen. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's good. Did you send the picture that had the picture of the entrance of the narthex?
Yes.
Good. Okay, good. I would say there are several things that you should consider as vitally important when you, or if you decide, if you decide to opt for this solution. The first one is to prepare your community. By that, you need to put out as much information as you possibly can, extolling the virtues of e-giving, talking about it, building it up, helping people to prepare for what they're going to be seeing in the not too distant future. And we found out that the more they know, the more the enthusiasm built. And we also included items in our Sunday bulletin. One of the other things they get, what's that square thing, the code? It's the UPC code. Yeah, it's. You also get a UPC code that is unique to your church that will allow some of your more technologically inclined parishioners to scan that into their iPhone. And the beauty of that is it takes them directly to your website and provides them all the information they need to make a donation using their web phone or their iPad or whatever. I will tell you that there's no doubt in our minds that in the last year and a half, we have gotten considerably more in the way of donations than we might otherwise have gotten. If you read the story that we put out, I relayed the story. My wife and I were spending a quiet New Year's Eve at home, and it was about 11:30, and I realized I had forgotten to give my Christmas donation. So I ran upstairs and made the donation, and I figured that was it. I came downstairs and told my wife, well, that's the last donation that St. Catherine gets for the year. And I will back up for just a moment and say that every time a donation is made, your trusted agents get an email advising that a donation has been made. Well, between about 11:35 and midnight, I think I got 7 other emails that donations had been made. I'm not here to tell you that we wouldn't have got that money, but I know good and well from people that I've spoken with that if they hadn't had the opportunity, if it wasn't available to them, if they didn't have the ease of being able to make those donations, the strong likelihood is that some may well have forgotten and we would have never seen that money. I don't like to talk in terms of averages because I don't know about your churches, but our churches, you know, donations ebb and flow given the time of the year. Obviously, during the holy days, Christmas, Easter, we get major donations. Sometimes in the dead of summer, things fall off. I can tell you, you get very extensive reporting on a weekly and monthly basis for all the transactions. There have been months where we've gotten in excess of $20,000 that have been donated through e-giving. There have also been months where we've gotten 3,000 or 4,000, depending on the time of the year and so forth and so on. I say that just to give you an idea of the range of the possible. And the other element of this that I would be quick to point out is when you give by credit card, when you give electronically, whether it's by debiting your credit card, or the other option is an electronic fund transfer from your bank, think of your bookkeepers, because that's one less check your bookkeeper has to manually process, has to manually deposit. So those are just some things to consider. And
I want to think that this, we started saying by the young people using it. To our surprise, many of our seniors use it because they like to get credits for their air miles. We probably have 40% of our parish go to Greece in the summer. You're talking in the hundreds of families being so close to DC. So it was amazing. And there is an option there that people can hit to pay the fees. And quite a few people, the major donors, you know, I'm talking people that give 5,000, 6,000, they'll opt and pay the fee, the processing fee. So the church doesn't even get charged the fee. So it's a win-win for all ages. And the other thing for those who are afraid that, oh my God, it's be intrusive somehow spiritually in the church or in the life of a church, or take away from the ambience of prayer. It has not been an issue or problem for anyone. So it's been a good thing. Therefore, we're looking to get another one to put on the other side of the narthex, because we have two sides and we really need another one to be placed there. So,
it's good. Father brings up a very good point, because offsetting the processing fee is a big issue. Now, I will tell you that Vanco has not perfected that yet, because that capability is only available on the website giving page. Unfortunately, it's not yet available on the kiosk, although they're working on it. Some of the bigger donations typically are made on the website as opposed to the giving page, but that's as opposed to the kiosk. But that's still not an insignificant factor. And as Father also said, the pleasant surprise has been how readily accepted this has been by the old generation. The younger folks, I think everybody would appreciate and understand, took to it immediately. But the older folks have taken to it, as Father said, far more quickly and in greater numbers than we really had expected earlier, and that's been a very pleasant surprise.
Do you have a sense for, in all of the reporting that's provided to you, how many transactions you're doing a month? Because I guess it's hard to know how many parishioners.
It's related, as I said before, as you might well imagine, to the total amount of money that you receive. Some months it's been maybe 30, 40, 50, depending on if it was a down month or in the dead of summer. On other months we've had 4, 5, 6 pages worth of transactions when we had, as I said, $20,000 or in that range. So as you can appreciate, I to be honest with you, didn't look up a specific number, but I can tell you it's been considerable.
Okay. And one other thing I wanted to note, Jim, when you talked about transaction fees, whether you use PayPal or your church has electronic funds transfer, they all have fees associated with them. They're just to varying amounts.
That's correct. And their rates are reasonable compared to other transactional fees from other vendors. What was I going to say? There is, and I don't remember their name, but there is a merchant account that is that Banco uses, and it's, their name escapes me right now, but they have a preferred vendor that they use that they'll put you in touch with, and you'll be able to link your merchant account directly to the bank that your church uses, and it goes directly into your account. And it's really a very seamless thing. It's easy to use. It's secure. There are no issues with security. So if anybody's concerned about that, this is encrypted. The implementation is simple. And in terms of the kiosk itself, as Father said, we're contemplating a second one. It's a small thing, so it's very portable. I would mention one thing about cost, because people typically ask about cost. As I recall, we spent somewhere in the vicinity of $1,400 or $1,500 for the kiosk itself. That's a one-time cost. And there is a monthly fee thereafter that you pay for maintenance and whatnot. It's minimal, whatever, $30, $35, $40. But we just kind of put that in the category of the cost of doing business, and we really haven't looked back since, because it's just worked out famously for us. So between the ease of use, the ease of integration, the benefit to the parishioners, the fact that they find it easier to give, they give more frequently, and frankly, I think they give more than they might otherwise have given if they wrote a check. Add to that the fact that it's integrated with our back-end system. Our bookkeeper loves it because it makes her life easier. We've just had very good results, and I guess at this point I'll shut up and answer any questions that anybody might have.
And there are several that have come in. Excuse me. Let's see. Let me go back to the beginning. Actually, Effie, the first one would be for you with regard to does a parish have to have a Vanco account first before utilizing, a kiosk or anything else? Can you kind of clarify that for everybody?
Sure. So actually, yes, you do need to have a Vanco account, and I am happy to connect our parishes with that. What ends up happening is that, the first thing they're going to consider is, are you a customer of PDS? And I'm excited to tell Father Gusta and Jim that actually the integration is actually going to even increase even further within the next month or so. Hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, God willing. So PDS, Vanco is their preferred provider, so that's one of the reasons that I went through the effort of vetting Vanco to validate their usability with us and with our preferred system that the Archdiocese has subsidized so greatly. So yes, if you are a PDS and a GOA parish, then we're going to get even better pricing. But yes, you do need a Vanco account first. And as Jim and Father Gus have been talking about, the kiosk is one piece. So the little square readers for the festival, the web page, the text giving, many different options exist. But yes, you need a Vanco account.
Effie, let's. Oh, sorry. Did you have something?
Well, I just something that Effie Marie said about text giving. That is an option, and I think somebody asked a question about it.
Yes.
You can give by texting, but that is an elevated level of service that you have to pay extra for. It's used extensively, from what I understand in my conversations with the people from Banco, by many of our Protestant brethren's churches. We didn't think we were ready for it yet. We hope it's an option that we can exercise at some point in the future, but it is available.
Okay.
And to dovetail on that, Stacy, really quickly, you'll see a lot of that with our youth where they're trying to pay you from their cell phones, right? Those bank accounts. So absolutely.
Right. Okay. I apologize. So there was a question about that. I misread, and the question also asked, does a parishioner, meaning does each individual have to have a Banco account?
Okay. So very simply, the short answer is yes. It's the same as an account you would set up with Amazon or Macy's or Saks. Not necessarily with a kiosk. With the kiosk, they are able to accept anonymous donations or set up donations that could then be integrated on the back end with parish data system. But typically, and especially with the website, it would work with any other online purchase you would normally make. You create an account. You would sync that account. You know, you would just sign in with a username and password. And, you know, yes. But at the kiosk, you have a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah. And let me see if I can add to that, Effie Marie, because
Sure.
I want to make sure people don't get confused. If you do not use PDS in your church, and you just have a standalone kiosk, you can use this as you would, let's say, something like PayPal, correct? And that means, yes, you would have to set up an account, but that's fairly straightforward. If your church does use PDS like ours does rather, your account is already in the PDS system, and when you swipe your card, it automatically gets recorded into your account. Am I right, Effie Marie?
Yes, absolutely correct, Jim.
Okay. So I just wanted to make that clear if there was any doubt.
Thank you for that, my friend. Absolutely. There is a synergy between PDS and Banco. So it is going to recognize you as a parishioner, absolutely, if you're in there, right?
Okay. Another question via the chat was the setup and monthly cost. And just briefly, I'm going to answer this. It's around $1,500 for the physical unit, the kiosk and the receipt dispenser. And then the monthly cost is between $39 and $49 a month.
Well, let me interrupt, if you don't mind. The maintenance charge for the equipment is somewhere between $30 and $40 a month, as I remember. But you also hit with transactional fees.
Right.
So, you know, it could be somewhere in the vicinity of, depending on your volume, $60, $70, $80 a month. But as I've told people who ask me about that, it's basically a business issue. It takes money to make money. And in return for that $50, $60, $70 you pay a month, if you're getting, you know, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, $12,000, that's really a small price to pay.
Sure.
I completely agree. Sorry, Stacy. I just wanted to jump in and echo what Jim said. He's 100% right. It is part of the cost of doing business, and we're finding many, many cases where the parishioners are covering the cost of their expenses. You know, oh, would you like to cover the cost of your donation, as Jim mentioned earlier? And we're hearing a lot of cases where they simply say yes. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So actually, absolutely, that works. It makes there is very little downside risk to doing this.
Okay. From Father George Livanos to Father Costa and Jim, he asks about parishioners filling out a pledge card. So I guess talk a little bit about how the electronic giving and the kiosk ties to your stewardship and pledge cards and how your parish handles that.
Well, at this point, the pledge cards or manual. Although, if I'm not mistaken, I think you can make an electronic pledge on the website giving page. By and large, that's the target, obviously, that each individual steward sets for themselves over the course of the year. At some point, I don't know whether it's going to be made available. That is, the pledge card is going to be made available on the kiosk. I would like to think so at some juncture, but right now I think you can only do that either manually or on the website part of the giving page. And we found that people use both, and we've had no particular issues either way.
Okay.
You're correct, Jim.
Okay, I'm going to keep trying to work my way through the questions, although we're doing great on time. So Jim Ganotis asked if the kiosk is mobile, and if so, have you ever used it off-site?
No, I would not recommend. Well, first of all, the kiosk is mobile. As I said, it probably doesn't weigh any more than 8 or 9 pounds at the most, and it's small. So yes, you can move it, but you have to consider a couple of things. First, if you move it, you have to move it to some place that has a source not only of power, but also an internet access, because that's the only way you're going to be able to process your charges. I was speaking to someone, I think it was in Las Vegas, and they asked the same question. And I told them, if you ever get to the point where you need another kiosk, whether it be in your church or in your community center or what have you, you're far better off considering getting an additional kiosk than you are moving that one kiosk back and forth. It's a pain, number one. And like with most electronics, if you keep moving it, the tendency to drop it, the connections get messed up. It's just far more effective, I think, to get 2 separate kiosks. Although, if push came to shove, you absolutely could move it, assuming you had a source for power and you had the internet connection.
Okay. And this is the next part of this is for either Effie or Jim and Father Costa. Talk about collecting donations, as the question says there, for ad hoc items, a Sunday luncheon, or a dance or something like that. It has that capability, correct?
It does. And I'll just go ahead and answer this from our perspective, and Effie, please by all means chime in as well. But for our perspective, if you notice some of the screenshots that we sent you, we've got a variety of donation opportunities available. Candles and trays, stewardship, flowers, holiday donations, gala tickets, dinner dance tickets, what was that? Missions donations for our missions committee. I mean, you pick and choose almost anything you want. For us, the major issue, and the one thing that I will tell everybody, and again, from our perspective, one of the reasons that compelled us to go to PDS is it was very simple for us to do what I'm telling you about, as long as we stayed true to the Archdiocese chart of accounts. So that when we had a donation for, let's say, stewardship, we knew it went into the stewardship pot. Or if we had a donation that was going to go into some sort of a fundraising activity, it went into that particular pot. And that's the benefit, I think, of having the connectivity to PDS, between PDS and Banco, because from an accounting perspective, it's just so much, so seamless, if you will, and so much easier to use from an accounting perspective.
Effie Marie, will you talk about this phrase, chart of accounts? I keep hearing over and over again. I was an English major, so let's start with that as your baseline. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and what that means to every parish?
My absolute pleasure, Stacy. So the National Chart of Accounts is something that every finance committee across the country and then the National Finance Committee came across, so from every metropolis. A chart of accounts is what it sounds like. It's a listing of accounts and their subdivisions that helps us allocate where our dollars go to and come from. And that's probably the most ABC level explanation of what a chart of accounts is, right? It's all good, me too, right? So there was a national team of us that came together to develop the National Chart of Accounts, and it was agreed across the country that the parishes would move to this chart of accounts. Every metropolis agreed to that. To be honest, my hats off to Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh metropolis. They are in the vanguard and the forefront of actually moving their parishes in that direction. But they're not alone, but they certainly have taken a step up in helping that to happen. We were able to integrate that chart of accounts into both church office and into ledger. So we really tried to build a better mousetrap. We tried to give you a solution where it was easy to allocate all of your dollars. Yes, it's flexible in that you can customize certain funds that you might have that another parish might not have. But it helped to organize and categorize giving and also expenditures. So that was the goal. So Jim and Father Costa integrated the National Chart of Accounts, which is in church office and also in ledger. And so it became a much easier way to track contributions. If you're not using it, you could still use the software, but as Jim said, it makes it fundamentally easier. So Vanco was integrated with that as well. I'm sorry, Jim.
No, I wanted to add another practical application and need for utilizing the chart of accounts. I don't know for a fact, but I dare say of the 24 or 25 people that are in this video conference, I would be shocked if at least some weren't involved in doing their own parish's allocation preparation forms back to the Archdiocese. If you are involved in that, you know what a tedious, time-consuming, and arduous process that is. If you're using the chart of accounts, it becomes factorially simpler. If you don't, you're just making your life much more difficult. It's by no means an easy task regardless, but if you use the chart of accounts, things are categorized in such a way that you can readily extract them for your submission purposes, and it makes a difficult process that much more simpler.
Does the chart of accounts have the pension obligation on there? Because Pittsburgh should really pay attention to that if they're going to use it, since they're so far behind. But if it doesn't, you should put it in.
Oh, Father.
I'm going to protest as co-chair of the finance committee, but I'll be quiet.
So I actually, Jim, thank you for saying that. It really is. God willing, in the future, one of my goals is to integrate those allocation forms into the ledger program so that basically with very, very few keystrokes, we'll actually build that allocation form for you. But that's not there yet, but that's a definite near-term goal.
Okay, so let me switch gears a little bit and stop the holy war between Father Costa and Father George. And during the call or during the presentation, I sent people a link to St. Catherine's website so they could see the web page where donations are done as well. And one of the other questions that came in was, Jim and Father Costa, do you have an idea of what's done on the kiosk versus what comes in through your website? Or do you want to talk a little bit about?
To be honest with you, I think we could get that data, but I'm sorry, I did not go down to that level of granularity for this presentation.
Okay, no worries.
I would add this. To the extent that you heard Father speaking about some of the bigger donations, several $1,000 donations, I think it's fair to say that people that make those larger donations typically do it from the comfort of their home as opposed to standing at the kiosk. It's not to say it can't be done on the kiosk, but I would venture to say that the majority of the larger donations, which we do get, I mean, I can tell you our record for a large donation is, I think it was either $10,000 or $12,000. And I know that came in over the website.
Wow. Okay. And really, and I've heard Jim say this before, and Effie Marie as well, what the kiosk and the more dynamic web page do is simply give people A, more options, and B, an increased level of convenience to give when it's in their heart to give. And I'll tell you just a quick story. On Sunday morning, I happened to be at the candle stand in my church, and a young lady came in and she kind of sheepishly said, I don't have any cash on me today. And she wasn't going to take a candle because of it. And I kind of smiled and looked at her and I said, we're gonna solve that in the next few months. And I smiled and I handed her a couple of candles and I said, don't worry about it. So the desire to have more options, more convenience for people to give in different ways is there. And some of those statistics are cited in the ministry profile that we did about St. Catherine's. So I just wanted to get in a shameless plug for that. Let me get back to a couple of more questions. There was a question about being contractually obligated for any amount of time, 6 months, a year, et cetera, et cetera. Is there, once you agree to use a kiosk, is there a minimum amount of time that you're committed to it, Effie Marie, or is it month to month? How is that typically structured?
So there is, not with Vanco, it's month to month. And you can change the plan between one of the two plans from Vanco. That's not exactly the same with PDS. PDS is actually also month to month, but because there's an agreement with how much the Archdiocese is fronting for the software initially, there's a small agreement between the Archdiocese and the parish. So if Vanco directly, no. PDS, yes.
Will you
sort of?
Will you talk a little bit more about that with regard to PDS? Because all of our parishes. In Columbus, we're still on Parish Soft, but as you know, we're making a transition to PDS. Right. Talk a little bit about the software fees that all parishes are facing and how PDS fits into that setup.
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. So for those of you not using PDS, the Archdiocese, as I said at the beginning, went through this massive process of search and this development. So the Archdiocese has negotiated a fantastic fee, and they will actually purchase the program, either church office and or ledger for you. They will pay for 12 months of support for both church office and ledger. Certain metropolises, and again, I have to say hats off to Pittsburgh. That's the second time in a single conversation I'm saying that. But Pittsburgh is at the vanguard again, offering 4 years of additional support. The direct Archdiocesan district is picking up 2 years. The Archdiocese is also paying for a 2-year support level. And also for conversion, the Archdiocese will cover conversion into church office. There is no conversion available for ledger because it's a financial program and there's a tremendous liability in migrating financial data, so they just won't. And I haven't found a company that will, quite honestly. So for the Archdiocese making such a tremendous, and for, of course, the 2 metropolises making such a tremendous investment, we do ask that at the end of that first initial payment, whether that's 3 years or 5, depending on where you're at, or 1, we ask that the parishes agree to cover PDS for at least 1 more year. Thankfully, we've not found people dropping off, but that is an agreement between the parishes and the Archdiocese, not between the parishes and PDS. After that, it's a month-to-month, and the monthly charges are both support and upgrades. So I mentioned earlier a few times, version 9, Greek and Russian language support, many, many new reports, different features and functionality, even more integration with Vanco we've been talking about tonight. So all of that is included in the monthly support cost, and it's really a tremendous offering.
Okay. Thank you, Effie.
Absolutely.
Let's see. I see a couple more questions. And this is for either Jim or Effie Marie. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's Vanco that helps you customize your own parish's web page.
That's correct.
To reflect what you see in the kiosk.
Or more.
Go ahead, Jim, please.
That's true. I just wanted to clarify, they do that, but typically on the web page, you have even greater options for not only additional categories of giving, but also for things like setting up a debit plan to deduct a certain amount from either your bank account, your checking account, through electronic fund transfers, or to deduct an amount from your credit card. And on the website, it's particularly attractive for the church because you also have the option of having the individual steward opt to select the offset fees option, which can help offset the cost of that donation. So I think that answers the question. We had a web page before this. I think we used PayPal, and it was okay. It was good for what it was, and I think by the time we got rid of it, it was about 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and frankly, it was a little long in the tooth. It wasn't particularly glamorous. It worked, but it was cumbersome. When we went to this capability, not only did we have a considerably more functional and dynamic giving page, it was so much easier to use. And the ease of use alone will stimulate interest and activity. Okay.
I'm going to ask one more question about the conversion process and support, because I know we've touched on that a bit. Effie Marie, would it be best for somebody to contact you to talk about converting to PDF and what support comes with PDS, and what support comes with that, as well as with Vanco and working with them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad to speak to anybody who wants to do that. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And then, so another question asks, what format did St. Catherine's initially use to communicate this program? How did the parish start to communicate this to parishioners?
We wrote articles in our church newsletter. We put items in our Sunday bulletin. We put flyers up in the community center just to get people's attention. As I mentioned before, we had the square code. Why do I forget the name of it? The square.
The QR codes.
Yeah, that's right. We had that, and that got a lot of people's attention. And typically, they're interested enough to scan it, and they're just blown away when it takes them directly to a page that talks about everything they need to know. And oh, by the way, then goes to the giving page. So it's a pretty effective way of attracting interest and attention to the plan. But I would say that your publicity, if you will, for lack of a better way of expressing it, is absolutely critical to rolling out your new e-giving process. One of the things that's very nice about Vanco is when you subscribe or when you accept their services, you get access to all of their white papers. There's a whole host of stuff that's available as it relates to studies that have been done, surveys that have been taken, trends that are in the e-giving space for churches that you'll find entirely compelling and usable in your articles and in the information that you provide to your parishioners that will work greatly to your benefit.
Jim or Father Costa, what happened to the one woman that said you guys were worse than the money changers in the temple? Do you remember telling me that story, Jim?
I do.
Yeah, we threw her out.
It really goes back to what Father said earlier. We had some degree of anxiety about how the old folks, the older parishioners, would react to this. And I got to tell you, I was expecting the worst. And then one day, I did have one of the older parishioners come in, and she wagged her finger at me for about 20 minutes. And as you said I was worse than the moneylenders that Christ chased out of the temple. But, I got to tell you, that was the only time that happened. I wish I could tell you I've seen her use it, but I haven't. But if only one did that, we're way ahead of the game. Because
sure.
we do notice quite a lot of our older parishioners using it.
Good. I'm trying to make sure I have gone through all of the questions. Let's see. Already using Vanco. How do we get the Vanco solution integrated with PDS? Okay. That was from Nikki. And Nikki, I sent you Effie's email for you to contact her directly on that one. I think we have made it through any of the questions I've received via chat. I will say this, that Father Jim Corderas included the ministry profile on St. Catherine's with the stewardship mailing that went out to all 550 parishes this year. And at the last Archdiocesan Council meeting of the Stewardship Committee, electronic giving was a primary subject of that meeting. A lot of parishes are interested. I know Jim has received 6, 8, 10 phone calls from parishes around the country who are interested in electronic giving. So it is definitely a topic for today and for the now, because people simply aren't carrying cash, and good golly, checkbooks are going the way of the dodo bird. So I appreciate, unless there are any other questions, I appreciate all the interest tonight.
Jim, if I could, I'm sorry, Stacy, I did it twice. If I could just jump in 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Jim over there and with Father Gusta. I'm sorry. I wanted to say that what Jim said was exactly correct. Don't do any of this in a bubble. We have a parish using PDS and also Vanco in Georgia. And what they did was to gather information and to get people to give them pictures and come to pictures and all this. They did this. They said anybody who filled out the forms and gave them their information and participated in these initiatives would receive a free color pictorial directory of the parish, right? And so they were rolling this out just after Holy Week, believe it or not, and they were getting 3 and 4 and 5 updates of parishioner records a day. That's another function that you can do, is parishioners are able to update some of their own data in PDS. But my point is, don't do this in a vacuum. right, or in a bubble. If you let your parishioners know what we're doing and how it's an opportunity to increase ministry and participation and communication within a parish, it's going to be a much more successful implementation, whether it's PDS alone or PDS and Banco or whatever combination they're in. Don't let it be a surprise. What Jim said was absolutely gospel true. Get it out there, explain what you're doing and what your goals are. We want to make it easier for you to communicate and participate with us. And to Father George's previous question, pledges are enabled through the website, through the Banco. You can enter a pledge in Banco through the website on your page. So absolutely, but don't do it in a vacuum. Make it part of a holistic solution.
If I could also add one more comment. Effie Marie and I just throw this out for everybody. I don't know where many of the participants in this evening's video conference are from geographically, but just for your information, Effie Marie and I had discussed having a training seminar here at St. Catherine sometime in the middle of January. Effie Marie, remind me, did we pick a date?
No, Jim, but you're exactly right. I think we said the second week of January or thereabouts.
Right,
so no, we haven't, but they're in Mount.
Suffice it to say, if you want to learn more about this, we'll nail down a date here in the not too distant future, and you're more than welcome to join us here and see it up close and personal.
Okay. Thank you all. Sorry for my office assistant's outburst there. It's horribly unprofessional of him. We did have one more question that came in with regard to aging out of the technology, meaning the physical iPad itself. The question was, I know there's a one-time fee for the kiosk, but what about a few years down the road when the terminal is out of date or there are changes, et cetera, et cetera? Any insight about that, Effie Marie or Jim?
I mean, speaking for myself, Effie Marie probably knows more about this than I do, but obviously having had it for about a year and a half, we're not at that stage yet, although that is a very, very good question. And at some juncture, I would imagine that they're going to migrate to something that requires less hands-on maintenance. I will tell you this, using an iPad, I don't want to say it's problematic, but every time the iOS on the iPad gets to the point where it needs to be upgraded, you've got to accommodate that, and you just have to plan to update it at a time when your kiosk is not being used. So at some juncture, I suspect they're probably going to move to some sort of a different platform, but for the foreseeable future, I think the iPad, it works well, and I would imagine they're going to continue to use it.
Sure.
And I expect that that's the right answer, Jim.
Okay. I mean, personally, I have an iPad that's now 6 years old, and in computer years, that might as well be 20. But it still works. You could still update it. I understand the concern. The concern is, would I have to buy a new piece of hardware again down the road somewhere? That's
look. I think the benefit is if I can't imagine that they would change platforms and not upgrade you as part of the monthly fee that you pay. Effie Marie, you can perhaps speak to that. But if it ever comes to the point where they do make that kind of an upgrade, I'd like to think that would be offered to all of the existing users.
They haven't talked to us about that, except that they have been very, very flexible and forthcoming with their options, honestly. If they went from an iPad to a completely different solution, Jim, I agree with you. I think in terms of aging out and how old is my iPad in human years, or in tech years, I should say, I think if you wanted to upgrade the iPad because you wanted to upgrade the iPad, I think that would be out of your pocket. I haven't heard anything else about them just replacing it out of the goodness of their hearts. But if they went to a different solution, I'm sure that there would be some sort of mix. Some sort of offering from them.
You said something that confused me, which is my normal state, so I'm going to ask you the question anyway. I would be reluctant to upgrade the iPad on my own only because it's a sealed system.
Right.
And to put in a new iPad, you would have to basically take the case apart, which I would not recommend.
I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree.
All right, so it sounds like we'll have to jump off that bridge when we get to it. Okay, well, hearing no other questions, I want to just offer my thanks to Father Costa, to Jim, to Effie Marie for enlightening us all tonight. I have everybody's email address that participated in the call, and can send you Effie's contact info. I think Jim would appreciate it if more people called Effie than him. He's been getting the lion's share of phone calls lately from Las Vegas and Chicago and Washington and other places. But Effie is available. She's at the Archdiocese. Her email is emsmith@goarch.org. And I'll be happy to send that to everybody via text. Father Costa Pavlakos, because we have a Father Costa Karas on the other side of me. Yeah. Father Costa Pavlakos, would you offer a quick closing prayer for us tonight?
O Lord Jesus Christ, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as this evening has come to a close with the setting of the sun, we ask you for your blessings. We thank you, keep in mind all those in the Archdiocese, our Holy Church. And prayers us indeed to receive this holy season. For blessed, holy is your name. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.